Running Sentences presents The Long Road to Get Home, Part 4, The Willow of the Woods. Ventured's journey continues with a little more direction this time, but old stories keep them on their toes and on the lookout for any problems that might find them. This story is written and narrated by Michael Hunnery. It is a work of fiction, so any names, characters, businesses, events, and situations within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, situations, characters, businesses, events, and/or fictional businesses, characters, events, and so on is purely coincidental. Copyright 2024, Michael Hunnery. All rights reserved. The burst of wispy magic, combined with the dirt, that shot off towards a direction, snaking here and there like a river would, as Keith tried his best to hold the spell together. Oh, it did work. Well, that's great and all, but from here it looks like we'll be headed back towards that river we were away from, and this town isn't going to provide much. So, what do you guys want to do? We'll cross that when we get to it. For now, let's get moving as far and fast as we can. Alright, group, will this magic hold up and direct us this whole time? No, it lasts for about an hour, Barn. Then I would need to redo it. I only have so many components, though, so there will only be so many times I can make this work. From the edge of this town, the group begins setting off, following this dusty wisp of magic and where it points them. Their hurry of steps brought them through the field to a new wooded section of trees. It was a light area of trees that was gone by the time they'd realized they'd entered it. It did, however, lead them straight to the river bank with its wideness and apparently fast-looking water. That doesn't look crossable. The dust of dirty magic had turned into a swirl of water and wind where it met the river and snaked about and across it. We have to do something, Erie. Miss Claudia, if a person is following the town, say that got left behind or something like that, how would they follow the town? I would say follow the tracks it makes, I guess. Oh, I've never done it, or heard of anyone who's done such a thing, but I suppose it's a possibility? Langer's question had brought a lot of questioning looks all around from the group. What? I had a thought that the walking city would follow the lifelines, then so would people walk where the magic points us. You want us to take a chance on a dangerous-looking river to follow where the magic directs us? Keith said doubtfully. It's worth a shot, right? What better option do we have? No one seemed happy with the idea, and Langer was getting frustrated. Getting dark out, and they didn't have time, and if this magic faded while they were bickering or trying to cross, it wasn't good. Well, I'm gonna go follow it. You watch in case of anything bad happening, but I think I'm right. He took a few tentative steps off the bank of the river, testing where the water was and wasn't. It didn't feel deep, but there was no telling until he fully stepped out, and he was well aware of that fact. But if he just followed this little stream of magic, maybe it would be okay. With the setting sun blasting the river top, making it hard for Langer to pick out where the ripple of magic was pointing, he set off. The trek of a few feet had turned into 50 or so, and he still felt not that far from the bank he'd just left. He found himself almost able to pick out where he needed to go and where he felt safe. Is it safe out there? No idea, Erie, but there seems to be a path across here that I'm walking on, so maybe. Should we follow? Well, Barn, that's up to you, but I'd say yes, otherwise you'll have to build a boat, and you'll likely get stuck underwater sandbar I'm walking on, I'm guessing? There were a few splashes of water behind him, which he ignored as he presses on, following the water spout that hovers just above the river. In spots, the area he found himself on walking was slim, his feet slipping off the firm mud, taking his foot a few inches down before he could recover. Managing to save himself, though, he hurries along until he reaches the far bank of it, exhausted and needing food. His friends soon manage to join him. Gathering, they all sat down for a moment, taking in their new space. It was calm, quiet, though the trees here were a different type, with low, drooping branches, heavy with an item on them, and those apparent things on the branches were ill-looking ashen vines that hung almost to the ground. Well, I think we should stop here for the night. It's already late evening, and gather some food and resources so that we can get a direction tomorrow and follow the magic lines again, I guess. I'll check out the area and make sure it's safe, okay? Be careful. Caddy gave an odd look to Claudia, but then scampers off. Why give out that warning, Miss Claudia? Oh, it's probably nothing. I have heard some things about these trees, though, Barn. Horror stories, Claudia? She nodded to Keith and frowned. The trees will try and entangle anyone who gets near them with their vines, or something like that. Care to explain this further, or is this some story you just heard? Story, mostly, but I've heard people going into the woods like these and then disappearing when they were supposed to return. The stories go that the trees use vines to entangle creatures and hang them. There were a few glances towards the trees, which sat a few feet away. Does it eat them or something, or do they just get killed? I'm not entirely sure, Langer. The stories don't have anyone returning to tell the tales. And yet we have stories. How fun. She shrugged to Barn. How did we get these tales if no one returns? Another shrug from Claudia, since she didn't know, as they all sort of stopped what they were doing. Barn had collected a few branches and twigs for a fire, as the rest had been setting up the campsite for the night. A rustle of noise made them turn as Caddy came back, looking unscathed. Is something wrong? The group pointed towards the trees. They may be killers. Trees, Langer. Really? Yes, the stories from around here say that trees are out to kill us. They seem fine to me, as I circled about. They may want to appear that way. Who knows, in this strange plane of existence, what they will and won't do. And for now, everyone stick together with one person if you venture far from the camp. They nodded to this suggestion as the work resumed to get ready for the rough night of roughing it. Caddy, having been ignored, came further in, still looking puzzled, and to Claudia for answers. What's wrong with the trees? If you get close, the vines that hang on them will try and grab and kill you, or hang you, literally. That sounds like a vine problem, not a tree one. Well, I guess we will find out then. And as the night passed, part of the group got ready for sleep, while Langer and Barn found themselves up for the first watch. This mission, sir, has not been worth it at all. Oh, it provides us with enough money so we don't have to do adventuring anymore. And, saves home. Don't you want that? I would love that if I thought it was true, Barn, but we can both see that this is a bad mission for how much we're being paid and for how much we're going through. We haven't gotten into that much trouble. It was simple enough to get to the location and find that stupid ball. Who has it, by the way? I thought you had it, and it wasn't simple to get there, and we went over mountains and fought goats, which chased us from one side of that mountain to the other, then fought a few swamp bug mug things that wouldn't leave us alone either. It's been hell getting anywhere around here. Barn nodded in the fading light of the fire. They kept going, but kept it low so that it wouldn't be easily spotted. Fine, it hasn't been easy, but this job is not that much more difficult than anything we've done before. It sure feels worse than before. A howl of wind cuts through the woods, making the shadows of the vines dance all over. Both jump, and then went to the ground to avoid them. They were a good 10 feet away from the nearest tree, and the long vines did reach out quite a distance, but they did not come close to them. When they realized this, both stood up and dusted themselves off. It's been a challenge, but we're fine. We usually go through this kind of thing. We're all expecting the worst to come around the corner now, though. The guy who hired us told us it was a simple grab job to save the world. Our world. Yes, and we both bought it, didn't we? I know. Never take anything at face value when it comes to a job. I was hoping, though. Having looked through his rucksack, Barn pulls out the gleaming bowl. It was the first time either had looked at it in a few days, and the weird glow it gave off sort of illuminated much of the area. Well, this wasn't like this before. What are you even trying to do with it out in the open? Well, you mentioned it, and I wanted to see it and examine it to see if it had any hints to what it is. We weren't told much about it, were we? We were told to leave it alone. Something about old curses? Things inside, maybe? I've forgotten. I thought you were all about questioning things that were going on around us, weren't you? You love to peruse questions? Well, yeah, a bit. Langer had gotten a little closer, but actually looking at the ball was difficult with the light it was giving off. No matter how much it turned, and in a variety of directions, a heavy light was cast from it. It did not react like this when we first got it. Yeah, but it was the daylight. Maybe it acts like this at night, and for people who need a light? I don't know. It doesn't look like we're able to actually get a read on it in this state. And we're both supposed to be paying attention to our surroundings. With a look up at the sky, as he tucks the ball away, Barn nods and took one more look about them. Well, I think our shift is about up, a couple of hours. Let's get up Claudia and Erie. With a nod, Langer does exactly that, and the two stretch and yawn while the first two went to sleep. A few moments later, Erie was by the fire while Claudia had mostly fallen back to sleep. Wake up, we have to talk. Slowly, Claudia sits up, rubbing the last of sleep from her eyes for the moment. About what's with them and where did you learn this information? What books I have managed to read while captured in that town, and when stragglers came in with them, told me about them. The people would tell you the stories, or the books? Where did you get these stories? Yes, I got some of the stories from those who came around these trees. And some of them were from books, and some of them were from people. They were in such a stupor, those who came from around here, that they babbled and talked to the first person that would listen. And that was you. On the few times they came by, sometimes yes. Did you know about these trees beforehand? I had some knowledge of them, Erie, but having never seen or been near them, I didn't pay that much attention, only told to avoid them. Erie listens, but doesn't like the sound of it. To her, it sounds like an answer that one had either put a lot of thought into, or not enough into, and thus was a lie. She couldn't figure out which it was, or if there was some truth woven into the words. Instead, she concentrates on her surroundings, looking out for anything out of the ordinary. Their watch passes by uneventfully, and moves to Caddy and Keith, who also have an uneventful last shift. They got moving carefully to avoid any of the trees and the vines in the early morning, a single-line formation, with one following the other as Keith's magic wound its way around and through the area. Each of them were ready for anything, as they looked for vines and trees to suddenly come to life and grab at them. But in the stifling heat of this morning, nothing aside from them seems to want to move more than an inch. The heat was taking its toll on them as they pressed on, trekking through the even, flat ground around them. It's weird, as usually with trees, that meant the ground would be uneven, but here it was flat as flat could be. There were no complaints about that, though, as the morning stretched to late morning, and then their first break came into view. A decent-sized stream cut across these woods. Barn, who was leading in the moment, held up his hand to stop them. "I think we all need a bit of a break, yes? Langer, if you could scout around and see if there's anything." "Sure. Am I going alone, or—" "Go get it done. We trust you to stay away from the vines." With a shrug to Keith and Barn, he shot off to go search about. The rest, though, collapsed by the bank of the stream, looking at its inviting water. "Is there a story you're going to tell us about these streams that go through here, Claudia? Some horror stories?" "No? Did you expect me to have one, Caddy?" "Yes, I did. You had one for the trees and vines, so why wouldn't you have one about the streams, or the rocks, or the flat ground as well?" There was a glare from Claudia towards Caddy, but nothing further was said as she moves away, instead heading towards Barn, who was checking over his gear. "What was that ball last night?" "The what?" "Glowing orb in your sack, and I hope you don't have a dirty mind." Barn nods at this, apparently the thought having come to him along those lines. "It doesn't concern you?" "It might if it attracts problems in these woods, or attracts problems whatsoever, and I am traveling with you." "It's part of our job, and it shouldn't react at all to anything. Maybe." At the sound of their voices, Keith had come over, having dipped his flask into the water to refresh it. He stopped to take a sip, making a face as he swallows. "What's the problem? Is there a problem, or am I getting mixed signals about things I'm hearing from you two again?" "Your boss has a glowing orb in his belongings, and it's why you're here, apparently. It could be a danger to everyone." "Oh, that? We stole it off a dragon fair and square, and killed him. If the trees and vines want it, they can come get it." Trying to entertain all of this in her mind, Claudia looks to Barn. He wore the usual serious dwarven expression, giving nothing away. "What is it? The ball, I mean." "An item we were tasked with retrieving for someone for our realm." "You didn't examine it to see where you might want to avoid, since who knows what these types of things react to certain events?" "We couldn't really get a read on it. Anyway, why were you spying on us last night? You should have been sleeping." "I was awoken by a bright light coming from your direction." "Yes, well, ignore it. It is nothing to worry about." "For now, maybe, but it might not be." The little glaring contest between the three was interrupted as Langer came back, jogging slightly, but seemed to be in no rush. "Anything around us?" "Trees and stream go quite a distance in either direction. I didn't follow it fully since I needed to see a whole lot of it, and it seemed crossing back and forth was better than, just getting in one direction." "Did you cross the stream?" "Yeah, that I did, Harry. Not far into the other side at all. It seems that the trees were getting thicker, with vines all over them." "Well, that doesn't bode well." "We will make do, Claudia. Rest for the short break, and let's get moving again. Time is of the essence." The group splits up a little bit, sitting around the river and collecting themselves for the moment. Claudia, though, judged the group with suspicion from her spot. That had been the first mention of time crunch, and that ball was weird. She could just get the weirdest sense of magic coming off of it, and she didn't like that at all. When the break was over, one by one, still in line, they crossed the mostly shallow stream. The woods on the other side were definitely packed tighter with vines, seeming to be everywhere. Langer was now in the lead, and looking about for any dangers while Keith was right behind him. Did you cast that magic spell again?" "I'm saving it since I don't have many components left. It was leading up this way, though." "You sure about that?" "Pretty sure, Langer, pretty sure." With a nod, Langer took a hard step away from the vine that was blowing a bit in a breeze that he didn't really feel, but he could see that the wind was moving. He didn't stop moving, but the fact that the vines were disturbed him. It wasn't like it was reaching out for them, though. And whenever the breeze was there, cutting through this thickness he couldn't feel, which was really, really weird. Anything wrong up there? We're slowed down a bit. I keep bumping into Barn accidentally because the line keeps getting held up. Sorry, Caddy. The vines are weird and I wanted to make sure I didn't touch anything. He moves forward once again, trying to keep everyone away, any of them, and the trees as the wind breeze thing move through the area. And any other plants seem fine though, and uninterested in them as they marched past. Up ahead, the woods thinned out a bit, though those creeping vines did seem to be more numerous in that area. Langer tries to figure out if he should slow down again, but fearing that was going to lead to him being yelled at again, he presses a bit onward. Vine! The group swirls on their feet to see that Eerie was tangled up in her ankle in one of these vines. Barn had his sword out in a flash of a second and hacking away at it, which was soon sliced through. Eerie drew her foot away, pulling the remainder of the thick plant from her ankle. That was weird. Was it? I did warn you that these things could happen, Eerie. Claudia offered her hand to help Eerie, who took it to get up. That vine wasn't there before. In fact, this part of this trip has been extremely quiet, which means something is after us. No animals or monsters chasing us, nothing wrong aside from the heat. It all feels normal, and yet that happens? Don't think like that. It will get you in trouble. It's best to be suspicious of things to survive, but don't worry about them. And I will point out that that's how you've been ever since we've met. Suspicious to the bone. It's not helpful. Claudia snaps at Eerie. Everything okay back there? Langer inquired. We're fine. Get moving. None of that sounds fine to us, Barn. Keith, it was a simple vine, and it didn't do much to Eerie. We need to keep moving. I'm fine, really. We should move. I don't think we should go this way any further. Why not, Langer? All I can see ahead of us are those deathly traps of vines that are simply sitting around waiting for us to walk into them. The trees are impossibly thick. There should be another way around here, and I'm not sure if we're headed in the right direction in the first place. Before you ask, I'm not using the last of my components for the tracking spell yet. We need to keep going. Nothing stops us, you two. Press on. We know how to avoid this stuff. Langer, though, had not moved forward, with his paws looking back to his associate, who seems okay at the moment. Might I ask, what is the rush of all of this? We only have so much time to deliver that object back to our home, okay? Bad things can happen if we don't get back, and it's risky for the planes of existence, since things might fall apart in our realm, and then who knows what happens to the other realms. I don't know the whole story completely, but that's what I was told. The group was turning to face Langer, who was holding them up. Realizing they weren't going to listen to them, he turns and begins moving once again. Through the area they trample, one foot in front of the other, keeping things simple. This new area of trees had thinned out, making it possible to move a little more freely, though the thick wall of vines made that seem not so great. And these vines had now replaced the trees, making it feel like they were being corralled around these woods. It's sort of walled off. Langer kept them moving, following the path that nature had afforded them, snaking one direction and then a different way a few feet later. The afternoon sun that broke through in spots between the trees kept beating down on them, turning the area into a hot, humid environment. It felt like it was getting worse and worse the more they moved. Everyone okay so far? The question from Caddy broke the quiet they'd grown so used to. It's too damned hot to be out here. Really? You seem like the type of creature who loves it when it's hot out. Miss Erie, do not make assumptions about me based on my skin color and my race. It isn't true, then? No, I prefer dry heat to this nonsense. Thankfully, though, I think we're close to getting out of here. I only say that since our map guide isn't useful, and it is what I remember being told of this area. Then shut up and march, you two. Langer took another step forward, trying to ignore the whole lot of them, and their silly discussion, which was going nowhere. His foot, though, meant nothing, which made him look down in a hurry. A hill was before him, and it was a steep one that didn't look like it was going to be fun to go down. But down he was about to go, and the only thing he could do was grab a vine. Oh, hill! He got that out before tumbling down the slope end over end. When the rolling came to a stop for a moment, Langer lay still, trying to make sure he wasn't still moving, feeling a bit dizzy, and taking a moment to relax. And then, once it was all felt slightly normal, he began checking himself over, lifting each of his limbs and putting them down. A pain shot through his legs. Oh, Langer ignored it, so he could sit up to see where he was now. You okay down there? I'll survive for the most part. Is everything okay up there? Well, it's a dead end here. The vines and the trees surround this spot that you've led us to. Okay, Caddy, give me a moment to check out this spot before you all fall down here. Getting up, he looked about the semicircle of trees and vines that were before him, and that went to the edge of the hill from one side to the other, closing it off from anything. The clay-like ground made things a bit slippery to walk on as he moved about carefully. A few minutes of examining things, looking for spots that he could cross over, led him to a spot that looked slightly freshly open. Doubt and suspicion ran through his mind at this sight. Could he trust it? Did he trust it? And did he have a choice, since so far no other spots appeared? Langer gave the wall of vines and a tree another once-over for traps or any other ways out. Finding none, he returned to his hole. There is a space through here that would allow us to keep going. If you want to risk it, you have to come down here. There was the sound of boots on dirt sliding, which was followed by the sudden appearance of Barn. The dwarf kept his feet under him and looked over at Langer. I thought you were good on your feet. You slipped and fell in here? I was worrying about everything and made a mistake. Besides, you were all busy chatting away behind me, distracting me. Our way through here appears to be over there. Barn storms off in that direction that he was pointed towards, while the rest of the group began coming down one by one. Once all gathered, they marched to the spot where Barnes stands, waiting. I checked for traps and anything else. Nothing wrong, but it feels wrong. Well, we will deal with it like we always do. Head on if something happens. Let's move. Barnes plunges into the space, and the rest follow him in. A lattice of vines stretch and intertwine in a tunnel-like space for the group to go down. From the ground to 8 feet in the air, it stretches and covers. Barn was set at a much faster pace than Langer had, and a slight jog of one as they wound their way through the turns of this new pathway. Come on, I think I see some light up ahead. A deep, dark wood greeted them as they exited the tunnel and spread out a bit, since they now had room to do so. The trees were darker in color and higher up, stretching towards the sky, covering everything in shade. There were still some vines hanging off the trees, though they appeared to be different ones than they'd been dealing with. There still seemed to be some of those ashen ones in there as well. The area, though, was closed off from any further movement, which they were looking about. Do we separate and look around for our next avenue of getting out of here? Group up. No one alone, since we don't know what we can and cannot trust. Erie was quick to join up with Langer as they head off towards the right. Caddy and Barnes strolled a bit forward, leaving Keith and Claudia to check out the left side of this space. It was a full circle of trees that surrounded them. On the left, the search was heavy and close to the ground, going through the small details that they could find, though neither of them felt exactly comfortable to reach out and try and touch anything that wasn't the ground. "I don't see anything over here, do you, Miss Claudia?" "Dirt, which I'm not getting down onto the ground like you to examine. I can see it clearly enough from here." "You're not exactly the most helpful of creatures, are you?" "I am. I've helped you plenty, and I've warned you about this area, haven't I? And unhealing. Is that not helpful?" "You also led us into the trap in the town, so you've done good and bad. What does that make you to us?" "Useful, I'd say." "Not quite, at least not yet, unless you can give more information on these woods and how to stop these vines." She had actually wandered away a bit from him and didn't respond to his question. Seeing that she'd done this when he looked up, Keith got up and dusted himself off, moving after her. This conversation wasn't done in the least bit. "Answer me, Claudia." "What I know is that they wait and wait until the moment and no one is paying attention to them, then they strike. That's what the stories say." "You keep adding to this story." "My memory is spotted since I spent so much time in that cursed town. Things come and go, and I am not exactly able to remember it all, because everything intertwines with itself." Keith regarded her, not trusting these things could be so simple. "I think I found a way through. It might get a little bit complicated." The group hurriedly joined Caddy and Barn at a small hole that they pointed out. There was enough room to get down close to the ground and crawl out. "I suppose you want me to go first?" "You're good at sneaking around and finding things, Langer. I think it would be better to send someone else. Somebody who isn't as coordinated in case they struggle at first, and then we can pull them back in if it's necessary." Langer's comments only drew headshakes of no. So, with a shrug, he got down onto his stomach and slithered as best he could through the spot. Soon gone from sight, there was a moment's pause before his voice came through. "It's pretty clear on this other side. Come on." One by one, they began sliding through, with Keith being the last one to cross, and smiling at the fact that Claudia had to get close to the dirt and mud that she'd been so not wanting to get close to not that long ago. Before them stood a regular-looking woods, with no vines to be seen. There were still the ones behind them, which they were quick to move away from. "We're through. Good. Let's keep moving." "Really, Barn? It's already pretty late." There was a glance up to the sky by more than a few of them to see the darkening area above them. A moon was already climbing as high as it could, as the sunlight had heavily faded. "We need to get a bit further away from these vines to be safe, okay?" "Fine, I will give you that, Barn, but let's move only a few dozen feet. It's been a long day, and we haven't had much chance to eat," Eerie offered with a sigh as she looks around. The group stumbles a bit away, tired having moved all day long. The woods, though, were quite simple and gave way quickly to a green, grassy field, and beyond that a twinkle of light. "Well, that light, I would say, looks like a town," Claudia points out. "A town that gives off a twinkle of light in the distance." "Well, it could be a bigger town. Usually when there are fields like this one, it's easy to pick out cities and towns that lie far off in the distance. They cast their light for all travelers to see, calling them home." "And we're to believe that, Miss Claudia?" "Mr. Keith, all you've done is question me lately, and I do not appreciate it one bit. I'm telling you what I know about the dangers in this area." "Those vines never did anything, though." "Well, they cut your ankle, Eerie." "It could have been that I took a misstep, Caddy." The two friends, associates, glare at one another instead of at Claudia. "I'm tired, hungry, and out of energy. If the lot of you want to debate and argue, that's fine, but let's set up for the night." "You don't want to go to that town?" Langer shook his head no. I think it would be another half day of travel to get anywhere near it, and as I said, I'm out of fucking energy. I agree with Langer. I've pushed you all hard enough for the day and for the past few days. I'm sorry about that, but we're now closer to getting home, so it's all worth it. You think that place might have a portal out of here? From what we were told, most places with a decent population have at least a doorway to a bigger town. Then those traveling cities, as you call them, would have our way out. Is that not true? I can't say for sure, Mr. Barn, but I don't think most places have them. If you want to do that, you'll need to find a powerful mage, one who can rip open the seams of reality so that you can get out. But maybe there is one in there. The news didn't go over well with the group, as they had all settled in, getting ready for the night. Most had sat down heavily where they'd stood, trying to regain what energy they had. Eventually, though, they set about setting up camp for the night. When the morning came, the group began to cross the field they'd encountered the day before. They found themselves hurrying, though, as one look back showed vines crawling towards the trees. The snaking ash-white-like objects had grabbed a hold of the trees and now were stretching out towards them. End of part 4 of The Long Road to Get Home. Thank you for listening.